Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Speaking of the decade, uh-oh,
Find your clicker for
You
you.
gotta find
have I
it.
done something?
No, you're
No,
fine.
we
You're
need
fine. You
clicker.
stay. I'll go.
Yeah, done something wrong.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, there we go.
Now you're all set.
Thank you. Wow, so great to have you. Everybody, when you're thinking about this kind of Ollie work for the last decade, you think about the huge mega salary I got at Auburn. I've talked so often of the filth of lucre, and I know my colleagues remember rolling in the big dough. Yeah, waiting for those checks. Yeah.
Still waiting.
Yeah, used to get them. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot to be said for volunteer work. I love to sell Krispy Kreme donuts, T-shirts, and all the things. Did with honor societies and all the rest. But the Ollie teaching is really special because you get grown-ups. And you don't have to worry about paying taxes because there's nothing to pay on, right? So net, gross, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not going to the pen, at least as far as I know, for tax evasion from Ollie pay. So the volunteer is very, very nice. And as the individual who first told me about the program was going to indicate, it's very, very nice when you have people your own age who actually know what you're talking about so that you don't have to stop and say, now, let's think back and remember. You get my drift here that teaching for Ollie has allowed me to enjoy you as much as I hope you enjoy the lectures, and that will go on, of course, in 25, 26, if all goes well, because who can forget the Wars of the Roses? And how many of those cable shows have been about, starting with the Lancastrians and the Yorkists on to the Tudors and Stuarts. Movie. Yes, because I mean, those of us after today, I hope we can truly appreciate Richard II here because he had a short life, but a very interesting one. And rightly, he helps us conclude this course. He, I don't know whether I could say passed away or met unfortunate circumstances or whatever you want to say, 1399/1400. So we understand whichever particular year you want to get it with. It was what we would call an unnatural death. And of course, that makes it even the more interesting. He was the end, as everyone probably is aware, of the direct line of Plantagenets. So again, makes it so useful for us in this particular context. The idea of Richard becoming king has to do, of course, with the fact his father died and his older brother died. So, I mean, it's sort of like the accidents of history, don't you think? I mean, Richard II, I guess, was as bright and well taught as could be, but the fact he was king had much to do with those who preceded him. He was the son, of course, of the Black Prince. As I note, the Black Prince had two sons, and his mother, Joan of Kent, who actually was related to his father. And it's interesting, not important, but interesting that that was her third husband. But she had those two children by the Black Prince. And he was known as Richard of Bordeaux because that's where he was born. And you say, why Bordeaux? Well, we all love the wines of Bordeaux, but that's not the reason. Of course, the Black Prince was involved in the 100 Years' War, so we never forget that. Well, if the father, that is the Black Prince Edward, died, and he did in 1376, that means that now his son will be the heir to the throne. It's an odd situation, isn't it, when you think about it? And even more odd, I think, is the fact that the grandfather, Edward III, died the following year, because he must have been, as we used to say, on his deathbed when his own son was dying. So when you think about life and death back then, I guess it's not terribly surprising that, you know, the plague and all the rest of it, Black Death, and so much was going on at that particular time that I don't guess we're too terribly surprised. Whatever the case, he is now the ruler. His mother was a powerful influence, naturally enough. And again, you can go to a family tree and see how they came about from King Edward I to get that way. Because both Joan and then, of course, as the heir of the Black Prince. But then there is the figure of John of Gaunt. And for I know our people who know Shakespeare so well, these are old friends. I know. John of Gaunt, named for Ghent, the city, was, well, I would have to call him the wealthiest and most powerful individual in France or England. The Lancastrian estates, and now, of course, he became premier advisor for the, I was going to say little king, but I guess I can say that, 10 years old. But he had a lot of power, and I guess at that point, Uncle John was very important, and I guess Mom said, let's be nice to Uncle John. I mean, it's like you have to do a lot of hypothesizing, don't you? Because it's not in the records, but we assume that she was a stage door mother, and obviously, if you have as many uncles as he had, you learn which ones you have to obey and what you have to do for them and keep them happy. Because don't you think every one of those uncles said it should have been me or that sort of thing? It's not like, gosh, we're just all happy to be one family. And this isn't the Waltons, people. Okay. So just making sure that we understand that there is a lot of rivalry. And I wonder, again, if Dr. Freud could have met Richard II. I know, and thinking about, tell us about your upbringing, your family life, and how did you feel about your mother? And what about your Uncle John? Did you love him? And, you know, and all of that. But he was carrying some baggage, I suspect. Not that I'm going to get sued for practicing without a license, but I think if we could talk to him in purgatory, wherever he is, we would find out about a lot. No, Frank. Oh, don't bite your tongue, but yeah, I know you didn't mean it the way it sounded. He loved his wife. There, that's good.
That's one good thing.
Loved his mother. Mother's Day is coming up. So we're all happy about this. He crazy about his friends, sometimes too much. And you say, what does this indicate? Could it indicate the possible, I know, loathsome, giving special positions to family members? Yeah. And he liked to be surrounded with people who were agreeable. I mean, don't we all? Who doesn't? But we understand that in the world of politics, and especially he was in his fairly early teens when he was beginning to tell Uncle John, I love you very much and I want to work with you, but you know, I am the king. And I'm not sure John gone necessarily, they had their problems. And I'm not saying Shakespeare had it all because I don't believe he did. Shakespeare was not a historian. He's wonderful. We love him. Please don't get on to me because I don't even get in trouble. I'm with my good friends up there, but just it's like dramatic license, don't you all call it? That's okay. I mean, it's not a problem. I know it's like watching Braveheart or something and saying, you don't. That's very naughty to say that about Scottish history, and let it go. We have people in history have anger management sessions, and we go through recovery exercises, and because it's just a story, and it's a nice one. I mean, like all those historical novels. Yeah, I have a lot of self-control. Yeah, Janet. I mean, in large part thanks to you. I mean, it's like it's just a story and it's fun. Let it go, because it's not reality. So basically, we get tired of uncles and others who are called the natural advisors. And that means the rulers surrounded by the nobles. And of course, you know what nobles means, lay and clerical, who wouldn't like to have a bishop around helping you. All of this is to say that that's not the way Richard wanted to roll. He wanted to have his friends around, and that would cause some very, very serious problems. In other words, you have problems because it would have been nice if the uncles and other people of authority were going to exercise the position of true advisors, but he sort of put up with that, but then he hung out with his own people. Now, it's interesting to think about the 100 Years' War at this time, because somehow his representatives and the representatives of the French king, who had his own problems, personal and regnal, Charles VI, we'll talk more about him next year. But basically, they decided to come to a truce. I'm not sure if they did this personally or just their representatives did it. Because sitting through negotiations, you probably hear about it all the time. I know I do. I think I couldn't do that. You know, a faculty meeting was as much as I could take. Yeah. And then you don't look at a watch or say, you know, let's get on with it. We got to get out of here. But the idea of the negotiations led them to decide to have a truce, not a peace, but a truce. And so I guess that was supposed to be good for both of them. But in case you wonder, well, why are they going to last? Well, we'll see that next September. Yeah, absolutely. Most people, though, if you ask them, they wouldn't think about the intermission of the war or Richard's issues with his mother and uncles and all the rest. But if you were to say, what about Wat Tyler and the Peasants' Rebellion? That's where most people would know. I mean, I'm just taking random sample. If I were to go around Auburn and say, what do you think about Richard II's reign? Yeah, I know. Southern Union campus, random students,
They'd be going, what?
they would go, qua, qua. Basically,
Not go there.
no, no. The idea of the revolt has to do both with the poll tax, which brings up memories of 1990 for those of us with long memories. And the response to that didn't go over well. I believe it ended the career of Lady Thatcher. More or less, this poll tax, which I assume was a financial measure, was very, very unwise considering the discontent that had come about from something called the Statute of Laborers. And many of you will remember that. Basically, it says that whatever you received before the plague is frozen. There'll be no raises. Because back in that day, they weren't thinking about merit raises or any of that. We're just thinking about raises based on something they really weren't cognizant of as a concept, that is inflation. But it was very serious for them cost-wise, but they weren't willing to pay for the labor costs, given the massive death among the working classes. So this particular revolt seems to have been in the South. You can go to Tower of England and get the complete tour from the Beefeaters, and they'll tell you about it. The idea, of course, I suspect, was not that it was primarily populated by people from the lowest, but people from both towns and estates that were higher up. And they were so incited because it appears that it came from all of these vast manors, and they were revolting in part because of labor demands, in part because of that anger incited by a man known as Wat Tyler, because we don't really know his name, but he was a demagogue, if I may say. He was definitely considered by the sources to be a troublemaker who was bound to go to hell. Okay. Damn him. You know, it's like if you're thinking any of these chronicles are saying he was a brave hero who loved people, people who need people. No, this is all about the wickedness of Wat Tyler. And Wat Tyler was supposed, as a demagogue, to be stirring up people and trying to get these people to upset God's order. And you say, you mean what ho? Were they anarchists? Well, they were troublemakers, no doubt about that. Agitators. So, according to all of these accounts, Wat Tyler and an ex-priest, he was called John Ball. I don't know what Satan called him, but yes, that he is the symbol of demonism for them, because not surprisingly, it's sort of like some of you will remember liberation theology in the 1980s, Latin American priests who were sort of, I don't know what they call them, Marxist Christians or whatever, but they were basically saying all of this belongs to us. We are all God's people. And so all that, well, he ended up serving, I don't know if it was hard time or soft time, in the Canterbury lockup. And Canterbury, why Canterbury? Well, I think there was a certain archbishop who had a special place of confinement for troublesome priests. And he definitely not acceptable to the church, because this radical idea is totally unacceptable. Possibly if you'd been hanging out with a bunch of Franciscans and talking wild stuff like this, maybe you could have gotten away with it. But Ball is out there stirring up peasants who're supposed to be working. And I know, and you say, this is not during their recreation period. This is while they're supposed to be working. And he's telling them they're as good as everybody else. Or we all know that little poem from way back when Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman. Yeah. You think, gosh, I know.
I don't know that one.
Oh, well, see, that's why I'm here. It's all included in your tuition. Yeah. Lord and lady, yeah, they were there. No, they weren't. They were working. Remember when they kicked out? Go back to your Old Testament. Yeah, that remember the getting kicked out of that Garden of Eden and having to work. And they didn't go to Versailles. Nobody invited them to do any minuets. See? Yeah, I mean, it's all of that idea of everybody ought to be working. And you say, oh, reds, yes, yes. So all of this then is to say there was quite to do, probably mostly from around London, I would think. I would not think in the rush of time, what was this about, 81, that there was a lot of agitation all over. It's not like they could all go on the internet and say, there's going to be a big, yeah, I know it. It's like, this wouldn't go on like it would now, that people would, words out. I just saw it, on the web. Yeah. So, in these famous illustrations, the idea of they were rushing around the tower, and these nobles and so forth, including the king and his court, remember he's still a little fella, were gathered there, his mother, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and all these folks were screaming, and Wat Tyler was saying, we have demands, and very upsetting. But all of this was more or less ended by quick action on the part of this young king. Basically said, you presented me with a lot of good ideas, and I really appreciate, he seems like he was like a born politician, isn't it? Says just the right things. Not so much when he was older, but right now, seemed really clever at 14. He would say, I feel your pain. I know. it's tough to be a serf. Why don't we just do away with serfdom? And everybody's going, yeah, yeah. And he's going, keep going, keep going. He says, I want you all to hunt and fish and just, this land is your land. This land is my land. Yeah, it's like, can't we all just share? I love you very much. You say, gosh, this sounds so put on. You think? Maybe? So, more or less, and he was cute. So, and the king, and it's like, he's the king, and everybody's going like, it's those bishops. I mean, you're mighty, you're so nice. And I'm thinking, he's thinking, what do I do now? He said, well, thank you. I'm really glad. And let's respect the leaders. And so this more or less seems to have ended with a death. Actually, it will be the death of someone very, very important. And you can see it there in the illustration. And you can imagine who's going to get it. Wat Tyler. Wat Tyler probably ran his mouth more than was good for him. And the mayor of London seems to have removed his head. And everybody said, you know what? I really do miss my agricultural responsibilities. Back I go to the estate. And so it did end with a whimper, not a bang. And what is the real significance here? I think ultimately it's an example of what few chronicles tell us about, and that is, of course, over the centuries, there will be mass revolts of people. They won't necessarily create a lot of knowledge because we simply don't know. I mean, it's not that we have any information to go on. It's simply with the conditions that were going on, it's not hard to imagine that people did express their misery that way. But we can't prove it. Here we have the example, though, of something that's real and happened. But they went back to work, but they did not work without consequence for their actions, including a lot of deaths. All of this, of course, would include the deaths of that troublesome priest, John Ball, and the hanging of the head up from the outside of the city, and other actions, I guess, are an indication of conditions in the 14th century where respect for the body was not too much in evidence. But if you were to ask or to even inquire what significance does all this have, simply an example of the mass of people expressing their various discontents. Because I don't think there's anything more to it than that. But there will be peasant revolts in France, the Jacquerie in 1358, and then peasant revolts in Germany later on. All of this, of course, had been ascribed to the long-range results of the Black Death, but also perhaps it was just that time that there had been so much suffering that you're going to reach a point that people express their discontent. And of course, it did not lead to any change. It was just repression. But that's you say, what other great accomplishments did Richard II have? Well, you just heard it. That's it. Yes. So if you were waiting for me to name off, no, you're gonna lose out there because it isn't gonna happen. You'll be happy to know he was a great family man. He loved his wife. And it was Anne of Bohemia from Prague. Yes, lest we forget one of the great cities. Yeah. I don't get any kind of compensation from the Chamber of Commerce, but I'm just saying. And you say, why would Anne of Bohemia get to be the Queen of England? Well, her father was Holy Roman Emperor. I know. Store that away in case you're on a quiz show and want them to pay for your college. Yeah. So basically, it seems a very happy marriage because we are told that one of his uncles, perhaps, or maybe a cousin, came to the funeral in 1394, dying of the Black Death. And Richard lost it because he was late for the funeral. I mean, the story from one of the chronicles seems very likely, but was it personal vanity or was it really the mourning for Anne? Whatever it was, they were close, no children, so they were very close. But other than that, she seemed to have been nice, been a great influence on him and all that. But once she's gone, he no longer has that influence over him. And that's very important when we think about the last years. Because remember, this is 1394. And we will exit in 1399. So you think how we think of 5 years, most of us say that's just nothing. I know. And that, of course, is very important here. Because of negotiations, Charles VI and the English, what should we call them, team, came up with the idea, well, now that you're a widower, I know. We've got somebody lined up. We've got that 20 years. Yeah, maybe the oldies that you like will seem a little strange to this princess, but she's so excited about being Queen of England. Not. But this is, of course, Isabella of Valois. It's a bizarre thing to our way of thinking when you marry when you're 7 or 8, but the idea is that she comes, of course, with a very, very significant dowry fee, yeah. And as a symbol of the peace, age of Aquarius between England and France, and now this will be Isabella of Valois, and she arrived. Fortunately or unfortunately, she was not there long enough, according to canonical law, for any relationship. So basically, she just, I guess, continued in school, and she probably had her teachers there with her. Because, I mean, in our thought today, she was still just a young girl. But she was, because 12 was canonical age of marital relation. So, but she was still the queen. Now, in Shakespeare, which I love very much, as anybody would, yeah, just making that clear. She's presented as a grown-up supporter of the king and so forth. But I mean, that's nice. So we don't condemn the great one, the bard, the master, for that. But you understand, she wasn't. She was just a young child, and she getting on that first boat after he's indisposed. So that was 1396, and you think, what does peace bring? Well, it brings the filth of lucre, doesn't it? Yeah, because we don't have to spend all that money fighting in France. And of course, we can then be free from those annoying people in Parliament because they are really nuisances. They keep wanting me to do this and do that. And I want to do what I want to do because I'm the king. Some scholars have suggested that he actually had dreams of absolutism. I just find that highly improbable that he thought he was a Louis XIV come to England centuries before. But he was, I use this word guardedly, delusional in the sense that his uncles are going to say, okay, we love you very much and we want you to have all the power. And we're taking up a collection so you can get all the money you need. We love you very much. No, it didn't work that way at all because he had John of Gaunt on him. Okay, Uncle John, we'll get together for the family to come together and see what we ought to do. But he didn't like it, and I think as he got older, he became, you know how teenagers can be a little resentful. And John of Gaunt had his own agenda, like talking about in Castile. John of Gaunt was very interesting. All those Lancastrian lands up in the north of England were his through his first marriage. And through his second marriage to a Castilian heiress, he had interest there. And he had his own army. And he was going like, I'd love to stay and try to tell the King of England what to do. But my wife says I need to claim Castile in her name, in the name of Holy Church. All of this will lead him to leave, which is the first break, I guess, Richard is going to have when, Uncle John's not there to boss me around and tell me what to do. And it's not good because he will then, of course, sort of turn loose and sort of rule as he wishes without having many controls. But thanks to the pretty firm establishment of the powers of Parliament, because remember last time we talked about the establishment of the process of impeachment and conviction. So one of the individuals, Michael de la Pole, who will be a creature actually brought to power because of Richard II, favoritism. Dare I say sycophant? Yes. But, and he may have been corrupt. I know. We're from purity. We know nothing of that world. Thank goodness, right? We're like the state of Irish snow. Yeah. Yes. The idea, though, is he was royal chancellor, meaning he was head of the royal administration. But he will go down, as they say on the shows, for corruption. And more or less it's trumped up because we can't get to the main man, but we can get mighty close. and who is involved here. Probably members, cousins, and all kinds of people who are associated with the line. All of this is going to make it harder and harder for Richard. Richard will enjoy a period during the 1390s when he can rule in a way without controls because of John of Gaunt's absence. And that will be a very serious mistake for him. In addition to the wonderful parliament, there will be, as you see here, the merciless parliament, which means in essence that they are going even further to deal against what the king thought of as being his own interests. And the way they did this, of course, was by bringing charges against the royal administration. Again, not the king directly. Even in the 17th century, they won't do that to Charles I. It'll always be the bad advisors. But meanwhile, in this merciless parliament, these lords appellant, and that's the hardest thing to understand because we have one way of thinking of appeals, but in the sense that the term is used, they are accusers. So they are appealing not against the king, but against the royal government. And these individuals include, we can't do anything about those kids, John of Gaunt's son, Henry Bolingbroke, who will be known eventually as Henry IV. This, again, is covered well by the Bard of Avon. Yes, don't want to get in any trouble here. I'm being on the leash here. I'm very careful. I don't want to, don't want to get any trouble. But all of this is to think, what issues does Richard have? Well, he probably has some mental and emotional issues because with the two popes at this time, he will actually bring up the idea, one pope, and I imagine he's slipping some money to somebody, of canonizing Edward II. You go, what? Yeah, why would you canonize Edward II? Well, he's your great grandfather, and he got a pretty rotten deal because remember, he died. I think the term we use is unnatural. Yeah. Who murdered the king? You know, if I wrote a novel. But that idea of canonizing him, he was a good king and he loved the people very much, and this is what they did to him. But so he is a martyr. He's a holy man. You're not buying, I can tell. But that's he didn't make it.
Yeah.
In case you're wondering about St. Edward II, it didn't happen, you know. But all of this is to say that even though he threw in his candidacy, I'm available to be the Holy Roman Emperor. You know, they had elections. You know, somebody pulls out, yeah, appreciate your vote and support, you know, yeah. You know, I'm bilingual. No, my German and my Latin. In any event, he truly had gotten out of control with his particular ideas and budget busting. He was spending like crazy, and you say, what money was he spending? French money. Remember all that dowry money? Yeah. It wasn't like they're going to cut back, so I'm going on a budget or using coupons. No, we are spending lavishly and giving all these sycophants. That's why they're sycophants, right? They want payoffs, and all of that means that there will be great discontent, including from John of Gaunt's son, Henry. And you're thinking, why would Henry care? Well, not only was he the heir to John of Gaunt, and many of us will remember from Act 2, Scene 1. Oh, yes. But I would dare not quote it in your presence because I would feel so inadequate. But just if you haven't read it recently, I could not suggest more strong. And don't go to one of those yellow and black things. Don't, please, do it in the original. Don't dishonor the Bard of Avon by bringing some yellow and black thing around. Yes, you read the original, and I think there's a modern English version. But yeah, I know. But go to Act 2, and there, John of Gaunt, in his last stages, will still be trying, supposedly, to tame Richard II and make him become a more successful king. All of that is to say that in the final stages of John of Gaunt, Richard had more or less become basically out of control. And remember, all of these lords appellant, powerful people, were in France or somewhere else if they had lived through this. Yeah. So, John of Gaunt had not only been on his deathbed, but Richard, for reasons that show he must not have been, what is this saying, in his right mind, had confiscated all those Lancastrian lands. And you all know, you mess with my lands, we're going to have some serious problems. So, in the words of the old song, it's just a matter of time. John of Gaunt's death, and Henry will be taking the next ship back home. Because not only was his father dead, but he felt strongly that his cousin Richard was no longer, shall we say, suited to be king. So I'm really not doing this for me. I'm doing it, why? Because I love you. That's why. You know, that's sort of the idea. I love these illustrations because we get the idea. King Richard II, and by the way, he had not been around because he was in Ireland. You say, oh, because of his Anglo-Irish love? No, because he was on a campaign to conquer more of Ireland, believe it or not. And apparently he was unaware that Henry had escaped France and was headed home. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm so glad you're back. No, it wasn't like that at all. But here in Wales, and I dare say they were probably not dressed up quite like that for this scene. Look, I'm ready for my close-up, but I don't think it was like that at all. But whatever the case, Richard, probably somewhat stunned, came back and suddenly he found himself, oh, what is it they always say in the movie? It's like, are you Richard of Bordeaux? We have a warrant here. Put your arms around. Oh, get down, get down. What they say in the movies. Yeah, we love that. Yeah. So we've all seen it. and hope none of us experienced it, but we're aware of that. But I am sure he was stunned. Sort of like, do you know who I am? Because there he was. He must have had some military force with him. But apparently, the royal military did nothing to help the king. So he was brought in custody. And I guess he started out in a facility in Wales. And then he was transferred to the Tower. And there he remained while they decided what to do with him. In the Tower, apparently, he was talked to about, you made some bad mistakes. And you'll be real happy. You got some great hobbies because, avocations, like you think about retirement and you think about what were some of the activities. This whole king business can be very stressful. So let's recommend abdication. Maybe there'll be a golden parachute, all kinds of enticements. There could have been some other business. I don't want to go into that, but I think maybe torture, whatever the case, there in the Tower of London. And Richard decided, you know what? I'm not a good king. I really want to abdicate, but I love all you very much. The document of abdication will indicate, I suspect, that he had a lot of persuasion because there will be some serious breastfeeding. I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. I'm so lousy. I don't deserve anything. I mean, it's like really dotting the dots, crossing those T's. I mean, it's all there. Henry's entourage had made sure that nothing was left to chance. But remember this, Richard had no heir because he was childless and his wife was still a child herself. So in that sense, Henry, being the son of John of Gaunt, had the greatest claim to being heir. But you know what Richard has become? An annoyance, an inconvenience. And he apparently realizes that from his suite at the Tower of London. Yeah, that I guess they don't need me anymore. All of this, of course, means that once they have the documents, which were, I think we can say coerced from Richard of Bordeaux, Sir Richard of Bordeaux. Yeah, that's what they would call him officially. Because that's kind of rude if you've been king. I mean, I'd love to be Sir Joseph of Auburn. Yeah.
Could be.
I know I dream of it. I'll be honest, but since I won't be king, that's what he was in the document, Sir Richard of Bordeaux. But he will be basically signing all these documents. And Henry, then, as the son of John of Gaunt, has a big claim. He will say, I've got experience, and my dad has been very involved in government. And I love the people, and been over in France, and I just want to help, and blah, blah, blah. And Parliament, consisting, I presume, of people who are strongly in favor of the Lancastrians and Henry of Bolingbroke are then going to say, you're right. You know what you are? The new king of England. All in favor of Henry being king say, we. Well, guess they're using English by now. Yeah, by 15th century. But whatever the case, this is an interesting way to be king, isn't it? Like a parliament, aka convention, sort of like, are there any other candidates? Seeing none, we proclaim Henry by law and by authority of God, and all of that. I mean, you say, gee, that's a bummer. That's not like, well, it'll work. It works for me. You want to call your majesty and get to wear all of them. Yeah, you will now be King Henry. Now, whatever happened to Sir Richard of Bordeaux? He went to a place way up north. You're almost in Scotland. Pontefract. Oh, have you been there? Yeah. Basically, I don't think it's not like a Days Inn or Red Roof Inn. Not a Hilton for sure. But at Pontefract, it appears that he was starved to death. At least that's what many scholars think. It was announced that he had passed away of melancholia. He missed being king. But I don't think anybody at that particular time was going to look around. Inquiring minds want to know. I don't think there was anybody who said, I think there's something, we're not ready for Agatha Christie to say we can't let this go. We've got to investigate. But it was sort of passed on like, real sad, but we've got to move on. Because, I am king now and you're not. And so, and he passed away and he admitted he was a yucky king. So, it's like 1 star, ratemyking.com. It's like, you're not going to be well remembered. And we're sorry, but the accommodations of Pontefract may not have been comfy, even by the standards of Red Roof. But all of this is to say that at first he was allowed to live, and I don't know if you want to put this on Henry IV, but basically it was decided, and this is like something out of Showtime or HBO, that maybe they just got to thinking, the new king and his advisor said, as long as he lives, there'll be some sort of, Richard II fan club. Could you imagine if they had these websites back then? And, the people said, we love you, Richard II. We miss you. You're so great. He said, where do these people come from? I have no idea, but there's a Richard III group now. Yeah, still. And they still love him very much. That's a subject for next time. But basically, it was just decided that the melancholia passing away and the Hunger Games, as we would say, for Richard II would work. And of course, now Henry will be king. Was he a usurper? Well, many people thought so. And he will have to deal with that throughout his reign. In accordance, as we know, Henry IV, Part 1. Yes, Shakespearean lovers. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed you all so very much. Thank you. Thank you.